Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Valens, and welcome back to the Journeys of Success podcast, where we talk to influential women and discuss the impact they've had in the communities around them. We will talk about their career paths, how they got to where they are, and the impacts that they create in the communities they work with. So stay tuned, and they will answer the questions that you have prepared for them. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our Journeys of Success podcast in celebration of International Women's Day. Through this podcast, we take the chance to speak to influential women who have created an impressive impact in the communities around them. Today, we have a special guest with us, Julie-Anne Savarit Cosenza. Julie-Anne is a dynamic leader with a deep commitment to community-led transformation. Her journey began back in 2004 as a 10th grader only. She continued to develop her project as she graduated with a magna cum laude degree in international relations with a focus on African development from American University. Today, as the executive director of the African Education Program, she spearheads efforts to unlock the potential of African youth and adults by building and growing community-led organizations focused on quality education, health, and community development. She will tell you more about her story today. So welcome, Julie-Anne. It is a pleasure to have you here on our podcast today.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay, let's kick it off then. So I would like to start with a few questions on your career journey. So tell us a little bit about the African Education Program. How did it start and what motivated you to initiate it?
Great. Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, this journey started over 20 years ago when a few friends and I were only in 10th grade. We had been looking to do a service project with a personal connection. I was very privileged to grow up in an affluent suburban area in the United States where we did a lot of fundraising for big causes like UNICEF or the American Heart Association, but never had that personal connection to who our money was going to. So we'd sort of been searching for a service project with that personal link. I also, growing up, had a soccer coach or football coach, as the rest of the world calls it, who's a native Zambian. And so our families were very close. I was very fortunate to be connected to a lot of African expats in the community. And fast forward to 10th grade, my best friend Hillary comes to lunch one day, and she had just watched a video about apartheid and was just very touched and upset about, injustice that had gone on in South Africa, and said, let's help African kids. Like, can't we do it like that? And I said, well, I love Africans, why not? I know a lot of them. I'm sure we can figure something out. And mind you, we're 14 at the time. So Africa, place, we're living in this little suburban bubble. So we go to my soccer coach and say, hey, how do we, do a project to help people where you're from? And he said, connect with my brother. He's a community leader in the town of Kafue in the country of Zambia, and you'll figure something out. And that's what we did. So the African Education Program started as just a service project. Working with my soccer coach's brother, we decided we would ship a container of gently used books and computers to the communities he was living in that were in need of such resources. And again, we were 14, 15, 16, 17 as we're developing this project, raising the first $10,000 to ship this container. And that's what I love about being on your podcast is how things can come full circle sometimes. And that was really it. The beginning of the African Education Program was this high school service project.
Great. Amazing. It's crazy how it began from such a little idea to what it is today. And at the time that it started developing, did you have any aspirations to where you wanted to take this project?
Very honestly, again, we were teenagers. I would be lying if I said there was a greater vision. The vision really came in the next few years. So what ended up happening is we shipped our first container, and we were about to walk on stage to have our high school diplomas and, throw our graduation caps. and had just found out that we were receiving a grant to travel and meet the community receiving the goods. And a few weeks later, that summer between high school and going to university, we went to Zambia. The three co-founders. My mom was our chaperone and took us there. And it was meeting our peers on that trip that changed everything. That's when it went from being just a one-off service project to something far greater. Our peers are the ones who shared that they don't have a safe space to go before and after school. That instead of distributing these books and computers to the schools in the area, it'd be a good idea to put them in one place so they can actually access them. And so that's where, again, this vision became a mission. And so the following year, we raised the money to just rent a small house, put these books and computers in one place. And we started with 25 teenagers, girls and boys. And this is where my mom also plays a major role in the story as a volunteer, keeping this organization growing for the next 7 or 8 years. She and I would travel every summer to work with the youth, work with the community, start developing programs. And I would say it was about 10 years ago that, we really started to develop a vision around community-led leadership, community-led development. The first 10 years of this was really about gaining trust in the community, getting to know the youth, their families, the challenges they face.
Okay. And could you share a pivotal moment in this journey with the African Education Program that reaffirmed your dedication to the community-led transformation that you were just talking about?
Yeah, I was mulling over this question because I feel like there's so many pivotal moments in the story when it's a 20-year-long journey, right? But the one that strikes me the most was us opening our special education program. And the reason why is because that program is actually led by one of our alumni, Febby. So I met Febby when she was in 8th or 9th grade. And even back then, she told me, Julie-Anne, I want to be a special education teacher. I have family reasons for this, and I want children with disabilities to have access to quality education. And Febby finished high school. She was the top of her class. She could have gone on to be a doctor or a lawyer or make far more money, right? And she still wanted to be a special education teacher. And at the time, there was only about a dozen government schools with special education programs. So the chances of her even being in a special ed classroom were very slim. So we said, okay, why don't we start a before and after school program together and get you started on your vision? And to see how this young woman remain dedicated and committed to that passion, to that commitment to her community, to that commitment to one of the most marginalized groups, in her community. And to see what she's doing today now at the Read for Rose special education program that we have is just amazing and a testament to what can happen when a young person has enough doors open to follow their dream, right? And she's really setting a precedent for what special education should look like, for what these kids with disabilities deserve in terms of opportunities and opportunities to reach their full potential and thrive. So that's just one of the many, pivotal moments. But I think that's one that really showcases the success that community-led development can have.
Yeah, no, and also, I'm sure you have so many moments, but it just shows that thanks to you and your organization that you're able to give these opportunities as well. Yeah. Right. So thanks for sharing so far. Now I'd like the audience to understand a little bit about your current position and leadership. So now as the founder, executive director, what are your core responsibilities at this stage of your career?
It's a lot less fun than it used to be. I'll say that, as our vision evolved, we really went from being an organization that gives handouts, right? we were giving out food, giving scholarships. Again, I mentioned we started with 25 youth, right? This year alone, we'll be empowering, I believe it's over 5,000 children, youth, and women through our various programming across Zambia. So when you shift from sort of handouts, right, to hands up empowerment, how do we break these cycles of poverty? How do we be catalysts for this community-led development? Your role as the leader of the organization really changes. I don't get to teach in the classroom anymore. I don't get to develop fun activities to do with kids. My real responsibility is looking at resource mobilization and partnership development. How do we create an ecosystem so that the African Education Program and this Learning and Leadership Center in Zambia thrives? Right now, the center is operationally, programmatically, completely community-led, locally led. And the last piece now is financially led. How do we make sure that this center lives on even when Julie-Anne's not the executive director anymore, of the African Education Program? So my real role is finding the right partners to come on to continue to create sustainable opportunities for the children, youth, and women that we work with. It's also about how do we diversify our revenue portfolio so that we're not dependent on one single donor. I'm sure folks listening to this podcast know, for example, what happened with U.S. funding and how so many nonprofits had to shut their doors because they were largely dependent on U.S. aid. So that's my real role now, is how do I set up, this organization and these programs to thrive no matter what? Because at the end of the day, if they remain dependent on our U.S. efforts, it's not true community-led development. It needs to be community-led from all standpoints.
Yeah, that's true. And what major obstacles have you faced so far, and how have you managed to overcome them? I'm sure here you also have a list of examples.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest obstacles is the pressure to grow, right? Nonprofits are expected to stay a certain small size, right? Grassroots, volunteer run. And that is wonderful work. It is needed work. It is really important to, reaching the real folks who are on the ground, right? But as a nonprofit, it's like either you remain at that size or you need to grow, right? I can't justify working full time, for this nonprofit at a salary that allows me to live and still only be serving 50 students, right? So I think the real challenge is that tension between needing to grow, again, to reach a more sustainable place, but staying true to your vision. For us, it's always been about quality over quantity. It's always been about depth of investment as opposed to reaching as many kids as possible, right? That's why our model in Zambia is an investment for over 10 years, even longer now. We'll be with children starting at the age of 5 and be with them all the way through university, right? So how do we balance needing to grow, needing to find more resources so that we can sustain, not get too much out of our mission, right? But also have that growth at the end of the day and keep it in a way that is quality programming, again, that always serves community-led development. And I think that it's that tension that's the biggest obstacle.
Okay. And as a woman, what unique experiences did you face, if any, when building this organization from the ground up?
Oh, that too, right? The list is there. So Zambia is an amazing country. It's a beautiful country. The people are incredibly welcoming. The youth are just so full of potential, right? It is a country that is very patriarchal and has a lot of hierarchy, right? And so I think one of the biggest challenges as a woman and also a young woman, right? Especially, I mean, now I'm starting to be seen as, an adult who could be the executive director of this nonprofit. But 10 years ago, it was, why is this little girl coming into my office, right? And asking me for money, of all things. So it was really about, I think there were challenges in showing that I am a leader. I am should be heard. I have things to say. But the flip side is also knowing sort of when to listen, when to be quiet. There are cultural differences between Zambia and where I grew up in the United States. How do you remain respectful of those differences? How do you not impose what you think is the right way? How do you always remain in listening mode and lead by listening, right? And so, I think those were the challenges of, again, finding that balance of being able to step up and step in when it was appropriate, but also knowing when to take that step back.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing so far. So now let's dive into a little bit on what community-led transformation means to you. Why did you decide to adopt this approach in your organization?
Great questions. I think for us, everything we've always done has been hand in hand with the community, with the youth. We never started a new program without it being inspired by the youth, by a challenge that they brought to the table, and not with them, right? Developing the solution with them. So even before we knew we were doing community-led development, we were really doing it from day one. I think the key moment, the pivotal moment for me was when I moved to Zambia again in 2013 or 2014. And I realized that even though I was living in this community and really deeply ingrained, at the end of the day, I'm not the one who's going to create real change. It's people who grow up there. It's kids who grow up there. They're the ones who understand the challenges intricately, right? And they're the ones who are going to know the solutions. It's not me. I really realized that my role was to be a catalyst. It was to open enough doors so that these children can grow into the leaders that these communities deserve. And I think that was that transformational moment where we really realized we're doing community-led development, and how do we make sure we're doing it to the max, right? That this is our number one priority and our number one strategy.
I think it's a great approach because that's how you expand also the impact that you create, right? If not, it's limited to what you can do as a person rather than involving the whole community.
Exactly. And that's where you see those ripple effects, right? When we talk about community-led development, it's also not just about the leaders who are going to lead their communities, the leaders who are going to lead their countries and even the world one day. It's also about, a man who respects his wife at home and takes care of his kids, right? It's about a woman who has the opportunity to grow her business and contribute to local development, right? So community-led development is at so many different levels, and the ripple effect expands it. So, yeah.
Okay. And how do you ensure that the programs that you implement are generally community-led and address the specific needs of the communities that you serve? I mean, you shared a little bit that the communities are the ones that know best, but is there a specific approach that you use?
Yeah, I think it's about growing local leadership. For me, it was about saying, I want to phase myself out and I'm going to do everything I can to phase myself out, right? To empower my colleagues to become the leaders and then they're going to be grooming the next set of leaders. A lot of nonprofits and companies, right? We hear about founder syndrome. These founders that don't want to let go or that, that can't give up their babies. I'm pretty proud of myself. I think I have very, very low levels of founder syndrome because, my ultimate goal is to no longer be needed because I know I'll have achieved, that truly community-led development and community ownership of the programs that we built together. So I think it's really about, again, listening, empowering, never holding anything, to myself. And also knowing that everyone on our team is going to make mistakes. I don't need to jump in because I necessarily see things going differently or maybe not going the right way. I would much rather we make a mistake, learn from it, and then truly change, right? So I think it's small tactics like that, but the biggest one is you have to get over yourself, right?
No, and I guess also this approach encourages people to contribute, right? Rather than being scared to do something wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So since this podcast is created to celebrate International Women's Day, I would like to address our final questions specifically to the women in the audience. So how do you perceive the evolving role of women in community development, and what emerging opportunities do you foresee for women leaders in this field?
Yeah, this is where I was thinking about this question again, and I believe that the pandemic, COVID-19, it was devastating for the world and so many communities, but there were silver linings that came out of it. And I think that one of those silver linings is around mental health and vulnerability. For a long time, women leaders had to lean in, right? That was even the title of a book. You had to be a strong woman. You had to lean into your masculine side. You had to make tough decisions, right? And that was how you could get ahead and lead, right? We sort of had to be in the man's world and act in the man's world to be a woman leader. And I actually think that, again, one of the silver linings of the pandemic was this whole 360 around mental health and emotions and vulnerability and everything being okay to talk about these things. I truly identify as an empathetic and vulnerable leader, right? I'm not someone who's going to hide my emotions. I'm not someone who's going to not showcase how I'm feeling because I'm the leader of this organization. And so I think there's a real opportunity today to find that balance of strong female leadership while also staying incredibly in tune to who we are, right? We are compassionate, we are empathetic, we are vulnerable. And that's what makes us better leaders, right? Is the fact that we can let go of our egos. We can listen. We can take that step back. So I think this is just such an exciting time for women's leadership across the world, not just in community-led development or the nonprofit space. I think this is just our time. And what I'll add, though, is I think what the exciting opportunity is that as women's leadership grows, we also understand that we cannot leave our boys and men behind. Because if we leave them behind, we're going to create these gaps, right? And that's where more domestic violence will go up. You'll have negative effects. So how do we take this moment of rising women leadership to not just empower ourselves, but truly empower our communities, our nations, and the world?
In the end, we complement each other.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question is, what advice would you offer to young women who are passionate about making a difference in the communities around them?
Follow your heart. That is always the advice I give is no act is too small. Right? So if you're passionate about a challenge in your community, if you see a place that you can make a difference, go for it. Don't think that any act is too small and that it won't have, again, a ripple effect, because you never know the person that you might empower, uplift, the next set of people that may be, empowered and uplifted. So I say, follow your heart. Ask for help too. Don't think that, because you're starting something, you have to do it alone. Ask for help. Don't be a martyr. Also, as women, we tend to do that, right? We tend to get into self-sacrificing mode and put the mission first and the project first. Just ask for help. Build the people around you, because that's how you'll have more success. And the last piece of advice is you're going to get hurt. You're going to make mistakes. You're and that's all okay, right? It's all a part of the journey. And as long as you stay committed to what your heart and your gut are saying, you're going to make a difference. So follow your heart.
That's really great advice. Thank you, Julie-Anne. Thank you so much for joining our podcast and for sharing your insights and story with us. We want to inspire those around us that when they have a goal in mind with hard work and dedication like you have done, they can achieve their goals. So thank you for setting that example.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again, Natalie, and happy International Women's Day, everyone.
Thank you.